think especially in the cycling space, it's become incredibly sort of fragmented with like all sorts of new channels, all sorts of new emerging brands, whether they're from Australia, America, all sorts of places. And like all these brands getting caught up in a wave of trends. Now you kind of see everyone doing a bit of the same steps. So I think in terms of prioritizing spending, the first one is really to like find your niche, and like there may be people who do the same stuff, but like what is it you stand for and how you can really stick to that. And then the second part in terms of engagement is obviously like how can you do that in a way that's quite disruptive. Hasnormal recently pushed out a big campaign in like print with a lot of imagery, and that was like pretty engaging, right? A lot is in all these sort of WhatsApp groups around like questioning, oh, this is silly, this is fun, but I think that's what they're essentially trying to get to.
Welcome to Ride Success, the podcast that takes you on a learning journey to a productive, creative, and active life through the power of the bike. In the podcast, I explore cycling's global trends, community needs, innovative business strategies, and the journeys of remarkable individuals in the world of cycling. You are listening to a limited series of recordings during Rouleur Live 2024. This limited series has 11 episodes, and in each episode, the guests are asked 4 key questions. Each of my guests has different insights into where the opportunities for success in the cycling industry lie. So make sure you to subscribe and follow so you'll get notified of new podcasts because they will be released in quick succession. In this episode, I speak with Tobi Dahlhaus. He is the account director at Leo Burnett, and he shares his insights on the cycling industry, focusing on brand visibility, the impact of the content creator economy, and the challenges and opportunities facing the sector. Now, back to the show. Hi Toby, welcome to Ride Success. It's a pleasure to have you here. I wanted to start by having you introduce yourself so that people that don't know you learn a bit more about you.
Hey Pedro, nice to meet you. Yeah, of course. My name's Toby. I'm from London and I've been riding and racing bikes for over half my life, so about 12, 13 years. And alongside that, in my day job, I'm account director at Leo Burnett, which is a really big and exciting advertising agency. And I mainly work on brands like Skoda, McDonald's, TUI, all sorts of big heart of the nation brands, and start to do quite a lot more in the social space as well.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that's a big company. I mean, if anyone works in marketing or advertising, they will have that brand in their top 3 for sure, like of biggest advertising agencies globally, I think. So let's dive into the questions that make part of this series, 24 Hours with Info Leaders. Where should cycling companies prioritize their spending when aiming to drive brand visibility and engagement?
Yeah, great question. I think those are quite like separate things, right? And I think from a brand visibility point of view, I guess like the first question is like taking that step back and starting to look at what is that overall brand strategy. I think especially in the cycling space, it's become incredibly sort of fragmented with like all sorts of new channels, all sorts of new emerging brands, whether they're from Australia, America, all sorts of places. And like all these brands getting caught up in a wave of trends. Then the first thing really in terms of prioritizing is who are you as a brand? Like, I guess what do you really stand for and how do you want to show up like externally facing? And for example, years ago it was way simpler. You had Rafa and Castelli, Sportful, and that was about it, right?
Yeah.
And there was like a really clear depiction of who it is. Like Castelli is this like Italian culture, like great winter kit, but also like doing a bit of like disruptive stuff here and there. Rafa was all about sort of classical, that more like feeling and sense
stylish,
of sort of culture. Whereas now you kind of see everyone doing a bit of the same steps. So I think in terms of prioritizing spending, the first one is really to like find your niche, and like there may be people who do the same stuff, but like what is it you stand for and how you can really stick to that. And then the second part in terms of engagement is obviously like how can you do that in a way that's quite disruptive. So yeah, you can do influence work, you can do stuff on social, but once you know who your audience is, and then the key bit is how are you going to reach those people in the right places, right? So like Hasnormal recently pushed out a big campaign in like print with a lot of imagery, and that was like pretty engaging, right? A lot is in all these sort of WhatsApp groups around like questioning, oh, this is silly, this is fun, but I think that's what they're essentially trying to get to. So it's like, once you're clear on that, it might be like TV, right? It might be this big out of home, like building a bit of a culture, like really standing for premium. Equally, it might be tapping into loads of different subcultures and niches across social with like micro influencers. But I think, yeah, you need to take a step back before you can start to prioritize what that spending is and where it goes, right?
Yeah, that's interesting because it touches on my next question, which is the content creator economy. And you touched upon the subcultures, touching on micro influencers, and really trying to think about where the brand fits and what they are trying to communicate. And with that comes, in some way, the content creator economy, influencers, content creators. And where do you think, like, with the rise of content creator economy, that the transformation from the traditional kind of medium to like the traditional sponsorship model to where now brands are investing a lot more on different media channels, like whether it's podcasts, YouTube. Do you see brands adapting to this shift? Do you see a way forward? What is your opinion on this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess obviously like the context behind a lot of it is like times are tough, right? Like budgets are getting tighter and tighter, and like influence is one way to like get content production and get scale in like a consolidated way, like at relative cost efficiency, which I think is why we've seen a lot more of that. And obviously, as platforms have grown, as TikTok has grown, there's more and more content creators always pushing stuff out. And I feel like a lot of smaller brands are starting to copy what some other people are doing. It's just becoming a bit of like a same sort of echo chamber. I think in terms of how it's changed that sponsorship model, again, if we look back at like years ago, you might have had like a big brand ambassador, right? You're Alberto Contador, you're Andy Schleck. And this is the person that stands for the brand. The brand, though, has to produce all that content. Guys like this aren't super socially native. Like they're great personalities, but they're not producing their content and doing it at scale. And that is quite a costly way to do things. And that has then shifted with like a lot of smaller people who you may never have heard of, but are producing like great social content, really engaging stuff, and you're starting to follow their journey and like follow their rise as well. I think ultimately there's a place for both, right? You kind of need someone who's going to give you that credibility for your brand, right? Someone who really understands the cycling space, who people might recognize, who you can use in your like production, you can be a bit of a spokesperson for your brand, but then also bring in the creators who can deliver that content for you at scale, like support you a bit with that. And like, again, there's so many different niches within that. You could go someone who's like all about gravel, someone who's all about like time trialing, someone who's like just getting into cycling, right? And that's what you can do. You can tap into them here and there at a small scale as a one-off thing, or you can partner with them and have more of like a long-term sort of collaborator approach. But yeah, I think it has changed a lot. I think that sponsorship model, even when you look at like world tour teams, right? Their content production is like skyrocketed because they see they see it being critical. Like brands are hungry for that space. On my team, we work with brands like Spats and like Sigma Sports and places like this. And like one of those key things is like how can we support them as well? To be honest, I think it's probably got to a place where like world tour teams and professional teams are taking riders who have good social media presence as well. Like yes, your like results are really amazing, but if you've got that extra bit of platform and a reach, guys like Victor Campenaerts, guys like Harry Sweeney, they're producing their stuff. Suddenly, it's an extra way in if they're at a level pegging with a different competitor trying to hunt for that contract.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a great example of Tour TTM, based in the Netherlands, and they have been doing amazing things in the content creator space, and they have used that for their advantage to gain visibility, sponsorships, and well, hopefully we'll see them in a couple of years in the Tour de France. Who knows? But so that really a brand that is doing a lot in the content creator space and is growing really.
Yeah, and I think just on them, like they're a great example of that. And like one of my good mates rides for that team, and he says it's like some great culture behind that, and you see that coming across. Like what they've done, they've realized who they are, like what they want to stand for, and how they want to show up. So like those three things are ticked off with them. They're producing stuff, I think, in Dutch or
they are
stuff, right? But like they know that is how they're going to get their personality across the best. Yeah, they could probably get away with it in English, but they're going to get less of that humor, less of that engagement through it. Sometimes they have subtitles and whatnot, and that's really interesting for a wider market. But they know if they want to bring their personality and that culture to life, that is a really strong way to do it and stage who they are as a team.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we could go on and on, but I purposely want to keep this short. But I just wanted to touch on that, the fact that you mentioned about teams bringing in athletes that have a higher engagement with their audiences. I mean, we see that a lot more with a lot more focus on the gravel scene, where brands are clearly, with going, you need to produce this much, and that's why you're coming on board. Obviously, I'm not within that space, so I can't say yes, that rider or that rider for sure. But from what I see, that's happening for sure. So I don't want to expand too much on this because it could be here for hours. But let's move on to the next question, and this is a major question, especially in the moments where we're going through at the moment. What from your perspective, what are the major tailwinds and headwinds for the cycling industry for the next 5 years?
I think for me, one of the biggest tailwinds and biggest opportunities is growth of a younger audience, right? Like you've seen this happening with running over the past year and a half, 2 years. Like running suddenly became really cool. Like 5 years ago, like if you ran, you'd be like, hey, he runs, that's fine. But now you're like run clubs, like cool brands, like all this sort of stuff. There's like streetwear brands in the running space. It's become something a bit like attainable. And I think that's starting to trickle into cycling, right? A lot of those younger audiences, like they get injured running and then start riding, right? That's what it comes down to. But suddenly, like you can start to see there's a bit of like fun tech behind it. You can like express yourself with the cycling fashion. It's just a nice way to be outside, and people are clocking onto that. Like 10 years ago, like 12 years ago when I started riding, it was a bit weird. It was kind of a weird thing to do, right? Like at school, everyone's like, what are you doing? Whereas like now, it'd be like, oh, I really want to join you. How can I get involved? So I think that is a massive tailwind, increasing that access and really supporting people on that journey. Like cycling's always been very elitist, and how can we adapt to that and bring in people on that journey? Because not everyone has the same knowledge that we all do and that all these brands currently do, right? So I think that's one of the key tailwinds. And then on the headwinds, I think like it's pretty clear to say it comes down to like costs. I think like post-COVID, we saw like costs massively increase from the likes of your chains and cassettes right through to kit. And that hasn't come down really. That is one barrier to bringing in that new audience, quite crucially. But also, as we touched on at the start, I think there's a lot of similarity in the space, like all these new entrants and even the classics who we've known for the last 15 years, they're all starting to do the same thing. And it's like, how can we pull that apart? How can you as a brand stand out and like stand for what you want with a bit of gravitas? I think similarly, like elite sport is declining in the cycling space. You know, like in the UK, you won't be able to watch the Tour de France in 2026 for free anymore, right? It's only going to be through subscription apps. And like this kind of bit it's not helping the tailwind, right? They're kind of clashing heads. So yeah, there's a big opportunity for brands to like build their like brand association, brand affinity because of those rising costs. And how can you like justify that? And then also, how can you bring these new entrants in on the journey when they are struggling to get access to anything and are struggling to get that learning that we all know and love from watching the classics or whatever?
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I wanted to kind of wrap up now with one kind of more personal question. What is the one thing that you do every day that enables you to perform at your best? And this extends to, it can be at work, your racing career, your personal life, however you want to define.
Yeah, I've been working for 4 years now, and I'd say the one thing that allows me to perform at my best in my work life, my personal life, is getting my ride or exercise or whatever it is out the way first thing, right? Like the work I do is pretty stressful. It's a lot of hours and it's a lot of unknowns. I could never know I'm going to leave at this time of the day. So like for me, riding first thing in the morning is critical to just setting myself up for success in the day. I've got my hardest thing done in the day. So no matter what comes at me in the day, I've already known I've done like 12 by 5 minutes threshold has been. Yeah, like nothing's going to be as hard as that at 5 a.m., right? So like once I've ticked that off, then anything in my day is going to be easy. So yeah, that is something I do pretty much every day and make sure I can do. Because on the instances where I have to ride after work or anything like that, I absolutely hate it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that is pretty hardcore. I mean, I would even go and say that's pretty like Spartan. Being able to train at 5 a.m. and do a threshold interval and then go to work. I mean, that's pretty hardcore, but kudos to you. I mean, like you said, you get the hardest thing done at the beginning of the day. And I guess everything else after that Sounds easy, comes easy.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for me, it means it sounds weird, but I get to live, right? Because like suddenly if after work is when you're having to do your training, you have no time. You have no time at all. Like you get back from work, you ride, you eat, you shower, you sleep. Whereas like now I've got all my riding out the way. I come home, all I do is eat and watch YouTube, right? I just chill out. And like that time is so critical to just like unwind. And that's how I make sure I protect that.
Very good. So we come to the end of our quick chat. This is part of a tradition that I started in the podcast, and every guest that comes on the podcast leaves a question to my next guest, not knowing who they are. What question would you like to leave to my next guest?
I guess cafe culture in cycling is huge, right? So the question I want to pose is, what is your go-to cafe stop order? I want to know what food you get, what drink you get, and what makes a good cafe stop for you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Toby, for your time. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Cool. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to this quick interview. I'm your host, Pedro Couto Lopez. You can find me under my own name on LinkedIn. You can find Ride to Success on all socials. And let me know if you like this format of shorter, snappier interviews with guests within the cycling industry. And if you like the show, please give us a review. Follow helps us to create better content and bring more guests to the podcast. Make sure you tune in to the next episode, which will be released shortly. Thank you for listening.